Hi everyone, it is Michael here from Brutus Monroe. I am so glad you're here. And we are going to talk about today foil reactive embossing powder. So if you've ever wanted your foiling to go onto a stamped image or a die cut or anything that you can emboss, we're going to learn how to do that today. So let's talk about it. So this is the Brutus Monroe Foil Reactive Embossing Powder. It is it almost looks like a clearish, opaque color inside the jar. It works the same as any other embossing powder, where you would just pop down some embossing ink, pour the powder over your project, and then heat it up. And then it's ready to go, and then we'll be able to foil it. So it's a really exciting product. I don't think that it's easy to tell in the jar what this does. So that's why it's important to have, some education. So today we're going to show a couple different ways to work with this. And we're going to be using the Brutus Monroe transfer sheets. This is a co-branded line with ThermoWeb. And this color that we're using today is called Red Static. So it's a really fun red print. It's great for the holidays. It's great for birthdays, anything red, Valentine's. And these are a nice large 6x12 sheets. So when you take it out of the package, this is what it looks like. And if you've never done any foiling, well, today is the day for you too. So you're going to learn a little bit. On one side, we have the pretty side. This is what the design is going to look like. And then on the opposite side, we have this more matte-ish, shiny, the dull side, right? This is not the side that goes up. This is the side that you would want facing up anytime you're using foil. So we'll talk more about that when we get to that part. But we're gonna do two different cards today, and they're really simple cards because the main focus here is obviously the embossing powder. But we're gonna be embossing some sentiments. So this is our Christopher's Sentiments die set. And this is a great set to add to your collection because it has so many different words and phrases. Smile, celebrate, hugs, thanks, happy, joy, hi, birthday. And you can mix and match those two, and they're nice and large. So we're going to be using the hugs today. I pulled that out, but you can see it's a nice large die that fits really well on an A2 card. These are great in 12x12 layouts as well because of the size. So the cool thing about these dies is you get two pieces per word. So you get a shadow layer, which is the back, and then the actual phrase itself. So I have already went ahead and die cut these for us today. And I cut the backing piece out of a silver glitter stock. And then I cut this out of black, and I did it out of black just to show you the contrast today. So you can see that when you line this up and glue it together, you have this really fun effect, and you can see, it separates your word from your project. So it kind of gives it that little extra pop. And we're gonna do an A2 card with this snowflake pattern paper. And our sentiment is just gonna go right in the middle. So it's gonna be a really simple card to put together. It's kind of little winter, holiday themed. Simple, simple, simple. But this paper came from the Twinkling Traditions 6x6 paper pad. So this paper pad is double-sided. There are 12 different designs. There are 2 sheets of each design. There's so many fun different things for the holidays, for winter. That's a really fun scene. But it's a great, these 6x6 paper pads come in a whole array of designs, but they're perfect to work with. They make nice little layers for cards, and we're gonna start with this one. So we're gonna do 2 different cards today. So I have 2 different versions of the die cuts. And basically what we're gonna do is set these aside because we're not gonna be foiling those, right? And I'm just gonna grab a different piece of paper to show you how this process is gonna work. I just turned on the Mink so it can heat up while we're getting this process together. Always be sure to heat that up, whether you're using a Mink, whether you're using a laminator, whatever you have, you want to make sure it's good and hot before you try to foil, because if it's not hot enough, that can totally affect the results. So we're going to have our foil reactive embossing powder. We're going to have our embossing ink. And for this, I'm just going to totally cover these die cuts, just stamping this right over top of it because we want to completely cover this in that powder. And that's why I put down a separate sheet of paper, so, you know, it's going to make a bit of a mess. All right, so I think we're good there. Let me grab another piece of paper to put those on, because if we would have poured the powder on this, it would stick to all of this. We don't want that. So then we'll just take our foil reactive powder, just cover it all up like a snowstorm. Be a good way to refer to it. Make sure you snow in your die cuts. Shake that around. We can pull those out. And this one needs a little bit more on the top. You want to make sure that you're fully covered. And then we'll set that down, pour our powder back into the jar. And set that aside. So the next step in doing this is to heat this up with your heat tool. And you're going to want to make sure to fully melt your embossing powder. And as you can see, you'll know it's fully melted when it's totally the original color of the paper. So those are nice and melted on. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and double emboss if you wanted to add like another layer of it to really make sure that you got that coated. You don't have to do that. Sometimes I recommend doing that, but I think for today this is going to be totally fine. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do is cut a little piece of foil. We don't need this giant sheet just for these. So you can flip it over if you like and kind of measure out how much you're going to need. And what I will say about foil is in your craft room, you should always dedicate a bin to foil pieces and scraps, because anything that hasn't come off on the foil, you can always reuse later. So you don't want to throw it away. Don't waste it. Totally save all that. So this is the carrier sheet for the mink. And what we're going to do is make sure that that is face up so the foil will react with that. And then we will place our foil directly over top, pretty side up. So you want to be able to see the pretty side. And then once it's good and hot, we have a green light here, so that means we are good to go. We're going to feed it in. It's going to take a minute for it to go all the way through, and I am going to run this through 2 times just to, you know, be fully sure that we adhered the foil, because what's happening inside here is the embossing powder is reheating just a little bit from the mink, and that is what's grabbing the foil, if that makes sense. But like I said, we're just going to run it through 2 times to be absolutely certain that it's nice and fully covered with our red. Okay, so we have 1 time through, and we're going to go ahead and just pop that right back through a 2nd time, just to make sure. Like I said, you don't have to run this through twice. I just am the type of person that likes to do things like that twice. So you don't have to redo it if it doesn't look right. But while that's running through, let's talk about another way to use this product. So you can use it in stamping, like I said as well. So I have our Snowflake Swirl stamp set here that I am going to peel off this Merry and Bright sentiment. And we're gonna go ahead and stamp this as well and foil it. So we will take our stick and stamp mat and a piece of, we'll do red on red, a nice little tone on tone. I think that'd be great for the holidays. Close up our Misty. And in this case, you do want to powder it a little bit because we are stamping. So we will go ahead and really ink up that sentiment stamp with embossing ink. Give it a nice good press. And then I'm gonna do that one more time to make sure it is nice and fully covered. Let's see, I think that looks great. So just as before, we are going to take our Foil Reactive Embossing Powder and pop that right over the top. And make sure we have that sentiment nice and covered. Okay. So our first little run through is complete, and we will finish this up in just a moment because I'm going to show you the kind of the reveal. It's probably going to just peel right off, but look, you guys, I will peel this out of here, peel our foil just to show you. You can see the hugs taken out of there, and these will come right up, and now you can see that die cut is perfectly foiled just with that embossing powder. How fun is that, you guys? And that's just a super easy way to foil something with our Foil Reactive Embossing Powder. So now, let's go back to our sentiment. Okay, so we're gonna heat up our sentiment to melt that embossing powder. And it's almost like once you melt that down, it's kind of revealed the sentiment. It's nice and shiny and bright. And once that cools for just a second, we're gonna take our foil, and I'm gonna use the same piece because there's no sense in wasting this. And that's just gonna go right over top of that sentiment that we stamped, and we're gonna place it back into the carrier sheet. And run that right on through. Okay, so we're all run through and ready to reveal our stamped image. So there we have a nice little tone on tone foiled Merry and Bright. So that's an easy way to add foil to your stamping. And then you have the negative piece too that you can see through the Merry and Bright. So no matter which way you want to do it, there's options, right? So I'm just going to take some liquid adhesive. This is the Smart Craft Glue from Scrapbook.com. And we are going to glue our foiled sentiments down. To our sentiment pieces. And I'm not going to glue every single part of this. I'm just kind of picking up points. And some got on my finger there, so basically what I'll do is just use that as the guide of the glue. And then line it up. So I think lining up the biggest letter first is a good starting point. I'm just using this scissor to pop it all into place where it should go. Press. All points are covered there. So that is the first one, and we're just going to do that same exact thing to both of them. Just gonna. So same thing as before. Pop a little glue. And adhere our sentiments. Together, and then you have the, I think once you foil these, they look, it like totally changes the look. So if you remember from the beginning, they were black, but now they're red and silver, perfect for the holidays. So there we go, we have two, and then this one you can add it to your card or you can save it or whatever, but like I said, I would definitely recommend trying it in many different ways. You know, it's going to take a little bit to get the hang of it, but you know, do what you can. So like I said, the first card is going to be really simple. So all we're going to do is take some dimensional adhesive for the back. And these are the Scrapbook.com foam squares. I love foam squares. I think they're just really easy to use. And just pop them right on. You can cut them into smaller sizes. Perfect, good to go. And then we'll just peel all that off. Okay, so all of our foam squares are peeled off. And I'm just going to center this. So an A2 size card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So this little panel from the paper pad was just cut to 5 1/4 by 4. So we have that nice little white border going around the edge. And then we're just going to add a couple foam squares to the back of our sentiment to make that even more interesting. A little more dimension, a little more excitement. And like I said, you can cut these to fit. So you just need a couple. You don't need a lot of points of connection here. You just want to make sure that it stays. But anytime you can add dimension to your projects, I think it really helps out. And another way that you can add dimension with die cuts is to layer them. So if you cut out the word part, you know, a couple different times and glue them together, that's a really great way to add dimension if you wanted to do that. But adding foam squares or foam tape does just the same. It's all dependent upon your preference. Or you don't have to add any dimension at all. You could just glue it right on. So then once you're ready, you'll just center that right in the front. And I chose the word hugs for this because I think it's important to remember that people still need like hugs and encouragement during, you know, the holidays too. It's not always just about, you know, happy holidays. Someone might need a little pick-me-up. So that is the first version of this card. Super simple. It's nice and foiled and shiny. The sentiment's kind of the star of the show. That's why I left that part really kind of just plain and snowflakes behind it. But that's the card number 1. And in the second card, I said we're going to do something a little different with a stencil. So I cut this piece from the paper pad to fit an A2 card. So that's just going to get adhered directly to our card base. So you can choose which side. There's either that red or the green, but we're going to make sure that the green is showing for this purpose. So we'll just put a little adhesive there. And we're going to line this directly up with the card base because, like I said, it's cut to that size. So 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And this is a top folding card base. And then I cut another piece of paper that is white. And this piece is cut to 5 1/4 by 4. So we'll have that design kind of going around the border. Then we have our sentiment. But what we're going to do with this is we're going to decorate it with a stencil. So I'm going to bring back in our stick and stamp mat. And I'm going to pop this right in the center. And then I'm going to take this stencil. It's our poinsettia stencil. And I'm going to kind of center this where I want it and have this little design there. Make sure that we stick the rest of this to the mat. Okay, so we're all good. And then I'm going to use 2 different sprays to decorate this really quickly. So we're going to use a Candy Apple Red Chroma Mist. This is a pigmented spray that you can spray on all different kinds of mediums, paper, wood, really whatever you want. But I did cut a little circle of paper to cover up this little part here. This is kind of really what I want the green to be. So I'm going to just place that over it so it doesn't get sprayed with the red. And we'll just go in a little tighter with the green afterwards. So I'm just going to shake it up for a second. And we want to get a little further away. And we're going to want to concentrate more of the color towards the center and then kind of lighter around the outside as if it were actual poinsettias. So that is our first little spray. And then very carefully, I'm going to go in and pick that up, and you'll see that none of the color got there. So I'm going to remove that. And then I'm just going to take some different pieces of white paper scraps that I have laying around to cover up the rest of it. So there's nothing, no rhyme or reason to this. I just want to make sure that we don't get too much green around the red. So I'm just covering it up very lightly. There's no specific way. You don't have to use masking paper or anything. And now we're going to take the leaf green. And from, 10 to 12 inches away, we're just going to spritz that on. We're going to let that dry a little for a second so none of this runs into the red. Okay, so that should be dry enough for what we're doing. I'm going to remove all my little scraps. Now that we kind of have the whole thing on there, I'm going to take the Pearl Shimmer Mist, shake that up a bit, and kind of just go over the whole thing to give it some shiny shimmer. And we'll give that just kind of a moment to dry up a little bit. And then what we can do is peel up our stencil. And we'll set this all aside for a second while we wipe up our area. And then you just want to wipe your stencil off. Much as you can, you know. And then it is important to clean our mat. So I'm just gonna, before we put any spray on it, I'm just gonna wipe away some of that color. And then we'll just do a couple little sprays of the Squeaky Clean Matte Mist Cleaner. And I'll take my dry wipe and just wipe that away. And we're nice and clean. So we'll let that dry and then we'll put our acetate back on top. So now, this is our fun poinsettia panel that we did with sprays and a stencil. I think it looks really cool. There's some pearlescent parts to it. So what we're gonna do next is add a little more dimensional adhesive. This is also a Scrapbook.com foam tape. It is a nice thick size. So we're gonna cut a piece off of this. And this is also, before we adhere it, it's going to have this border. So keep that in mind when you're putting on your foam tape to leave space for that border to happen. That should be plenty for what we're doing, these two pieces, because it's nice and thick, so it covers a lot of area. And then we're gonna go ahead and make sure we center this left to right, top to bottom, so we see that nice border on our card. And then we're gonna take our sentiment that we foiled, our hug sentiment. And this time, I'm not gonna pop this one up. I am just gonna adhere it right to the card base. So I'll take just a little bit of the glue. Now that it is glued, we are going to press that right on there. I got a tiny bit of glue on the front, so I'm just going to take a wipe and lightly dab that off. We will press. Press, press, press. And then that's our card. That is card number 2. It's the same principle, the same technique as the first one, but it's kind of a different background. It's using some spray, some stencils, but both of these cards are really effective and they're really quick. It doesn't take much to do this. So here's kind of a little view of all the shine. We added the shimmer to all of this. And then you also have this option too from the stamped version of our Foil Reactive Embossing Powder. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little project today, and we can't wait to see what you create.